It was one of those cold, windy nights that make you feel like the world's just holding its breath. The Dollar Tree was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The fluorescent lights flickered above, adding to the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Outside, the parking lot was practically empty, except for the manager's car, parked under the dim light. The wind howled through the streets, rattling the store's glass door every now and then, the sound sharp and jarring in the stillness of the night. I was working the late-night shift, just another routine evening. My younger sister's college fees weren't going to pay themselves, so I had to keep grinding. I wasn't complaining. It was just part of the deal. The job gave me plenty of time to think and, on my days off, take photos. I loved photography. It was the one thing that helped me escape from the grind. Urban landscapes, abandoned places, they fascinated me. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the quiet, or maybe it was just the wind outside, but the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. The manager handed me a box of supplies around closing time and asked me to put it in my car before locking up. I nodded and stepped outside, the cold wind immediately biting at my face. As I loaded the supplies into the trunk, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The usual nighttime sounds, the distant hum of traffic, the rustling of the wind in the trees, were all gone. The silence was suffocating, almost too quiet for this time of night. I shrugged it off and headed back inside, but as I reached the door, I noticed something strange. The automatic doors had opened slightly. Just for a second. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. Someone had slipped inside, just as the doors closed behind them. My heart skipped. But the manager was sitting at the back, focused on his computer, finishing up some reports. He didn't notice a thing. I thought about checking the store, but I figured it was just a customer who'd come in early to shop. So, I locked the door behind me and continued with my tasks. The manager gathered his things and headed home, leaving me alone in the store. I enjoyed the quiet, usually. It gave me time to collect my thoughts, maybe take a few pictures of the empty aisles. But tonight, there was a lingering feeling in the air, like something was waiting to happen. I couldn't shake it. I was doing a final check around the store, walking past the aisles to make sure everything was in order. That's when I heard it. Soft, rhythmic breathing. It wasn't the kind of breathing you hear when someone's asleep. It was too deliberate, too steady. I stopped in my tracks, every muscle in my body tensing. The sound came from the storage area in the back of the store. My heart pounded. For a moment, I stood frozen, listening. The breathing continued, slow and almost rhythmic, like someone was hiding back there, watching me. I walked cautiously toward the back, my mind racing. Was it a customer? The manager? But why hadn't I seen anyone? I quickly pulled out my phone, checking the store's CCTV footage. My blood ran cold as I watched the screen. There it was. The doors had opened for a split second just minutes ago. Someone had slipped inside. I hadn't imagined it. My breath caught in my throat. I dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher, trying to keep my voice steady. I think someone's in the store. They're hiding. I could barely get the words out. My mind was racing. What was I supposed to do? How had they gotten in? Minutes felt like hours. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching me, hidden just around the corner. I stood there, trying to control my breathing, waiting for the sound of sirens, the sound of something familiar. But all I could hear was the breathing. Finally, the police arrived. They moved quickly, sweeping through the aisles, their flashlights cutting through the dim store. It didn't take long for them to find him. Hunched down, crouched behind a shelf, his clothes tattered and stained. He didn't even try to hide. He just stared at me with wide, hollow eyes, his head tilting slightly as if he was studying me, memorizing my face. The officers took him away, and as they did, one muttered something that made my stomach twist. "He's been hiding here for hours." I felt a chill run down my spine. The man had been in the store the whole time, hidden, breathing in the shadows, and I had no idea. I had walked past him. I had no idea he was there, watching me. When the police left, the store felt even emptier, the silence even more oppressive. I locked up, turned off the lights, and stepped outside, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The wind howled in the distance, but the store was quiet now. Too quiet. I couldn't shake the thought of that man, crouched in the dark, waiting for the store to be empty. What had he been planning? Why had he been hiding? And as I drove home, the only thing I could think about was how close I had come to sharing that space with a stranger. A man who had been hiding in plain sight. I couldn't forget his eyes, staring at me, memorizing my face, like he was waiting for something. It was a chilly autumn evening, the kind where the crisp air nips at your skin and the scent of fallen leaves fills the breeze. The Dollar Tree was moderately busy with a few late-night shoppers picking up last-minute items. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting brief, unsettling shadows across the aisles. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. The wind outside howled through the empty streets, rattling the store's glass doors, creating an odd sense of anticipation. The night felt heavier somehow, like it was holding its breath. I was there with my son, Oliver, a bundle of energy and curiosity. He was 5 years old, full of life, his little feet constantly moving as we made our way through the aisles. I didn't mind. I had to run a few errands, pick up some essentials for the house, but the real joy came from seeing his face light up when we passed the toy section. His eyes would always sparkle, and I'd smile, knowing I had to tell him to just stay where I can see you. "Can I look at the toys, Mommy?" he asked, practically bouncing on his feet as we passed the brightly colored shelves. "Sure, just stay where I can see you," I reminded him gently, knowing full well that I could keep an eye on him while I grabbed a few things. He giggled and took off in a sprint, dashing a few feet ahead, his little feet padding softly across the store floor. I let him go for a few minutes, watching him as I picked up some cleaning supplies, trying to keep track of where he was. Everything felt peaceful, almost serene. The calm of the night, the hum of the store's overhead lights, the distant rattle of the wind outside. It all blended together into a familiar rhythm. But then, something shifted. As I turned to pick up a bottle of dish soap, I glanced up again to check on Oliver. My smile faded. He wasn't there. I froze. My heart dropped for a second. I scanned the aisles, my eyes darting from side to side. He had been right there, just a few feet ahead of me. "Oliver?" I called softly, expecting him to pop out from behind a shelf, giggling like he always did. But there was no response. I tried again, louder this time. "Oliver?" My voice was starting to tremble as panic began to rise in my chest. I quickly made my way toward the toy section, my footsteps quickening. I was sure he was playing hide and seek or hiding behind the shelves. But when I turned the corner, he wasn't there. The store, which had felt so warm and inviting moments ago, now felt cold and foreign. I moved down the aisles, calling his name, but each step made the silence feel heavier, thicker. No answer. No giggle. I reached the back of the store, eyes scanning every shelf, every corner, but still, nothing. My heartbeat quickened, the panic threatening to burst out of my chest. "Mommy?" A voice interrupted my frantic thoughts. One of the cashiers had noticed my distress. She approached cautiously, concern written on her face. "Can I help you?" "My son." I barely managed to get the words out. "He's missing." Her eyes widened. What do you mean? Where did he go? He was just here, I whispered, feeling a knot form in my stomach. He was right in front of me, looking at toys, and now he's gone. The cashier immediately alerted the manager, who came rushing over. The store felt smaller now, the walls closing in around me as the minutes dragged by. I couldn't believe this was happening. How could he just disappear? There was no way out. I was trapped, standing in the middle of an empty aisle, hoping for some sign of him. The manager started organizing the staff, and the security guard began checking the store's CCTV footage. I stood there, trying to keep calm, but every time I glanced toward the entrance, I expected to see Oliver running back to me, laughing. The minutes felt like hours. Finally, I watched the CCTV footage on the small screen the manager held. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw the footage from just a few moments ago. There was Oliver, standing near the toy section, looking around and fidgeting with his hands. And then, a shadow. A figure appeared from behind him. A man. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but I saw him place a hand on Oliver's shoulder, speaking to him in a low voice. Oliver hesitated for a moment, and then he followed. A cold dread washed over me. The man was leading my son out of the store. It was the security guard, who had stepped outside for a routine check. "Hey," he said, his voice shaky. "I think I saw something strange. The guy is with the kid, but he's not holding his hand gently. He's gripping his wrist. Oliver doesn't look okay." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Is he okay?" "I'm going to check," he said, his voice tense. Just as I heard him call out to the man, the footage showed the man flinch. He turned his head sharply toward the guard. His eyes locked with the security guards for a split second, and then, with lightning speed, he released Oliver's wrist and bolted for the exit. I didn't wait another second. I rushed to the entrance, fear and adrenaline driving me forward. When I reached the parking lot, I saw my son standing there, looking lost and confused. I scooped him up into my arms, my breath shaky with relief. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice small. "He said he knew you. He said you sent him." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Who was this man? What did he mean? I sent him. The police arrived moments later, and they quickly began their search, combing the parking lot, checking the footage again. But by then, the man was gone. He had vanished into the night without a trace. The security footage had only captured a blurry image of him, barely enough to make out any details. I held Oliver tightly, not knowing what to think, my mind racing with questions. What was the man's motive? Why had he approached my son? And what did he mean by saying I sent him? The store was safe again. The shelves neatly organized, the lights flickering softly in the corners. But for me, everything had changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been too close, something far darker than I had ever imagined. And the next time I let my son wander, I'd never let him out of my sight again.